Introduce yourself, please.
All right, we'll do. It's coming from up north, which is always a mistake this time of day. All right, how do I stop this sucker? There's a red light. All right, hello everybody.
Hello.
There's a red light on the camera. So there's a red light on the camera.
Is the mic on there?
Here, no. I'm gonna wander out here and see if I can.
All right.
Check the mic.
While you're doing that, how many people here are developers? How many people here run a store? Okay. How many people here are trying to learn enough WooCommerce or eCom to manage something for a customer? And
Jazz hands back here.
all right, so there are a couple of people that didn't raise their hands to any of those. Lady in the striped shirt, why are you here?
I'm an entrepreneur and I'm a sales executive during the day for a short period of time. So I want to just better my customer service practices and be able to get some creative ideas on how to treat my customers better at my job and in my long-term business.
Got it, okay. Somebody else over here did not raise their hand. You raised your hand before, yeah.
I'm aspiring to have an online store.
Okay.
I'm here because I keep learning things.
Okay, cool. Hopefully you're learning good things. Anybody else want to tell me, person in the back, lady in the red jacket?
I do all kinds of things. I'm just aspiring to learn more about WooCommerce.
All right. So most of this is probably going to be common sense.
Nick is the mic on.
All right, so most of this is probably going to be common sense. I'm too in the weeds to know if this stuff is common sense anymore, so you can tell me if there's something magical at the end of the day. But a lot of the things that make sense to do in the physical space make sense to do online. The question is, how do you apply it to, you know, the ether if you're not actually looking at your customer, okay? So again, my name is Toya Nakamusuru, based out of Austin, like you guys are. I'm a developer. I do Magento and WooCommerce and write plugins for Wordpress, etc. Okay. So I'm going to talk about handful of tips, tricks, suggestions. Bring up stuff that you might not have thought of that should help you with your customer service process, right? So you do not need to do all of these. You don't need to do most of these. These are, what is the saying from Pirates of the Caribbean? These are guidelines, really? So don't take all this stuff as religion. I take it as religion, but do the stuff that makes the most sense to you and test if you can, okay? So the first one is you start with a simple question. Are you selling online only, or are you selling in a physical space? Are you selling on eBay? Are you selling on Amazon? When I say online only, I mean like, do you have your own .com somewhere, right? So there's a word we call channel. A channel is essentially an avenue with which you make revenue. So selling on Amazon would be a channel, eBay would be a channel, Etsy, what's the rent the runway, Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, those are all ideas of channel. Your website is also a channel. Selling something in your garage sale, in theory, is also a channel, right? So it's all the different ways in which you are interfacing or interacting with your customers. Now, let's pretend that you're not a tiny store right now. Let's assume you are somebody like Neiman Marcus. What you would want is if you had 400 locations around the US, you'd want a customer that comes into the Neiman Marcus store in South Austin and buys something to be able to keep their history and knowledge when you go to the Neiman Marcus store in North Austin or in, you know, Baton Rouge, or they go online, right? So you should have the same kind of experience, hopefully the same exact experience in all of those places, right? That is mentally easier to think of for physical spaces than it is for digital space, but you want to sort of keep all of those things in mind. It is better to have a slightly worse service, but is uniform, than one avenue that is fantastic and the rest are crappy, right? Because then at least people understand the level of service you're gonna get, right? McDonald's does not make the best burgers, but everybody goes to McDonald's because they know exactly the burger they're gonna get, right? And so if I went to a McDonald's that had an outstanding burger, I'm gonna be a little worried, not because the burger was outstanding, but what is it that they're doing in that McDonald's that is wildly different? And does it mean that everybody else this whole time has been phoning it in, right? So when there's an outlier with this McDonald's, at least for me, as somebody that cares about processes, this is one of those things that would worry me, okay? Most people would just say, oh, that's a great burger at this McDonald's. And I'd be like, are they using beef? Or, or something else, right? Soylent, I hope not. So that's the kind of thing I would worry about if I went to some place where the service was, or the product was significantly different than what I'm expecting, okay? If you are selling, let's say in the US versus Canada, right? Are there good reasons why your prices should be different? So if you had a US e-com site versus a Canadian e-com site? Yes. Is there a reason why your prices should be different? Is there a reason why you don't sell to Mexico? Is there a reason why you don't sell in state 1 or state 2, right? These are things that most customers wouldn't know, especially if you're selling things like alcohol. You have to be careful because you can't ship that stuff across the border. It breaks, I don't remember what law, there's some interstate rules about trafficking, that kind of thing, unless you're a certain size. And so you might be able to sell some variant of moonshine in Kentucky, because it's Kentucky, and you can't sell it in Michigan or Texas. Yes, sir.
So the question on, I mean, price difference between Canada, Mexico, US, I mean, obviously there's taxes, tariffs, and exchange rates. So are you talking about, should you have a different price that included? Or, and of course, even like factoring in cost of living of say, Nebraska versus New York City.
Bottom line is you don't want your customer to think, right? You don't want them to have to think. So if you're selling something in the US, as much as possible, you should be charging one price. The only difference would be if you're doing something that maybe physically involves you showing up at their house or doing something in real space, right? Those are the kind of things that people logically understand might cost different amounts, right? But not necessarily. I mean, what's that company, MoviePass, did this whole thing where you would pay them $9 a month and they would pay for a movie ticket or something every week or something like that, right? Well, if you're in, Lawrence, Kansas, $9 a month is the cost of one ticket, so you're great. If you're in New York, you can't get a second run theater to show you a movie for $9 a month. So they're losing money off that first ticket, right? But because it's logically simpler for their consumer, they're not saying it's $15 in one place, it's $8.15 in another place. They're holding one price. Okay, so if you're talking in one country, yes, you generally want to have one price, right? If you're talking across multiple countries, you also know it might be better not to sell in that country than to look ridiculous on price, based on price. For example, if you are, let's say you're selling bicycles, okay? And bicycles you used to sell for 200 bucks in the States, and you're hit with tariff, with our recent tariffs, and now it's 250. Maybe it's not worth selling that bicycle anymore if you can still sell that bicycle for equivalent of 200 bucks in Canada, right? And so it would look weird, you're selling the bicycle for 200 bucks in Canada, and you're now selling the same bicycle for 250 in the US, right? Somebody looking at that is like, well, why are the Canadians, if you're, you know, a regular person, you don't understand that that is what's affecting the price difference, right?
Exchange rate.
Well, exchange rate is another one,
Yeah.
but you know, as part of exchange rate, for example, I might say, you know, most people don't understand the difference between 200 US and 200
Right.
Canadian,
Mhm.
right? Versus 200 pounds,
Right.
right? They're looking at the front number and they're not looking at the currency, which is, you know, 200 pounds is almost twice
Right.
200 Canadian,
Mm-hmm.
right? But as most people, they don't recognize that that is almost twice the amount. They're just looking at that front number. And so if you want to show the difference, then you might have to convert it from one price to another. So you say, oh, well, if you're in the EU, they understand what 200 pounds is, or let's say not EU. If you're in the UK, they understand what 200 pounds is. If you switch to saying I'm in America, maybe you have to show them those prices in pounds as well instead of US dollars, right? As a general rule, you don't want to do that because most people aren't shopping around on a country by country basis. But if somebody just does a price switcher, they're expecting the prices to look similar and not drastically different. Does that make sense? Yes.
I've seen online products that sold on Amazon in the UK, but it's not in pounds but in dollars, so it's confusing.
Right. And so one of the things to remember is credit card companies don't care
Yeah,
what the money is, right?
they do the.
They do all the conversions for you if you want them to. So if you have something that costs $200 US and it's 149 pounds, right? It might be in your interest to sell it for 149 pounds, but it might be in your interest to sell it for 200 pounds. Because again, people are, if they're referencing US dollars, you can get away with an extra 50 pounds, which is something like $80 or something in revenue, because people don't think of that difference, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does that all make sense?
And the only thing that I see a lot of is some of the suppliers will not ship. If you're shipping from warehouses, some places will not ship to certain countries.
Right, and that also depends on the products you're selling, right? So, depending on the products, some places you have higher standards for liquids, for makeup. Okay, here's a weird one. I don't even know why I remember this, but a lot of chicken that we bake in the States, you can't sell in the UK. And the reason is, in the US, we add bleach to the chickening process. I don't know where exactly that goes, but there's a step where we use bleach or chlorine to sort of kill extra stuff, right?
It's the
And the-
final rinse.
Yeah, thank you. And the Brits are like, we don't want chlorine in our chicken. And of course, they're
Putting our salt.
nobody wants chlorine in their chicken, but the Brits are like, we definitely don't. We don't want the processing, food processing, to get to the point that it might necessitate chlorine in the chicken or something, right? So you'd be like, oh, I'm just selling chicken thighs or something. I don't know. Selling chicken thighs. Why can't I sell these same chicken thighs in the UK? That would be an example of a product that you couldn't sell, right? It might be, I have this bangle, and it is 2 centimeters instead of 1.5 centimeters. At 1.5 centimeters, maybe is considered a choking hazard in some country, and they won't let it in, right? And so these are things you need to worry about when you start dealing across multiple countries. For most of us, it is simplest to start in one country and then sort of slowly expand or research your products before you expand. How many people are doing physical goods in their stores or thinking about physical goods? Is anybody thinking about clothing or technology? Any computers? No? Okay. So another example for computers might be, there's certain countries you can't sell hardware to because they have encryption or decryption technology. Now, most of the countries you're going to sell to, you don't have to worry about this, but like, if for some reason you can sell to Iran or South Korea, or North Korea, the government takes a dim view for you selling them encryption technology. Okay?
Isn't there still a list on that? Of
It's-
countries you cannot sell technologies to?
Yes, there's supposed to be 3 countries, but depending on who we're in a fight with at the moment, I think it's up to like 7. But as a general rule, it's North Korea, used to be North Korea,
Iran.
Libya, and Iran, right? But right now, I would assume Syria might be on it, Yemen might be on it.
Yeah,
It's-
State Department keeps a list.
Right.
Yeah.
It's relatively simple because most of your payment processors don't deal with those countries anyway. You have to really go out of your way to sell to them. All right, personalize your messaging. Have you ever gotten an email or snail mail that says, "Dear valued customer," or "current resident," or something along those lines?
And my favorite is dear square bracket first name.
That means somebody really messed up.
Wrong bracket, huh?
So when I get "dear current resident," I don't even open it doesn't make it to the house, right? I drop it in the recycling on my way in. Dear valued customer, sometimes, like if it's my insurance company or something, I might let that pass, but if it's something I don't recognize, I might open it just to make sure it's not somebody who just doesn't understand technology properly. But if it's a company that should understand that stuff, like, your cable company or something, or a competitor cable company, I toss that because they don't care about me as a human. They never care about me as a human, right? But they don't even pretend to care about me as a human, right? So,
You want the illusion of compassion?
look, fake it. I'm fine, completely fine with just fake it, right? So it's the same thing online. When you're sending an email to somebody, at best, you can use their first name. If you can't use their first name, use their last name, right? It's better than hello user, or their username, right? My handle online is Mr. Osprey. I would rather get a Dear Osprey than Dear Miss Akinmuser, right? Which I get all the time. Or worse, Dear Miss AK ... because their system doesn't handle 10 characters in your last name, right? That's the kind of stuff I see all the time, right? So when you are sending messages to your customers, you want to be careful that you are generating the right kind of messages to them, and you're definitely not doing the stuff that's like $ last name or brackets first name, right? If you're using any of the standard e-com systems, WooCommerce, BigCommerce, Shopify, etc., these guys have this all baked in, and they all have systems where you can test these emails. So you can test that you're actually sending what you think you're sending. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I got a snail mail from the university addressing me as Dr. blah, blah, blah.
You should have kept that.
Thank you for working me, that's great.
Right. So, there are 10? I think there are 10 of us in my family. And there are 10 people on the planet with my last name. Maybe it's 11 now. No, it's 10 people. Right? So, because my last name is very particular, I occasionally get confused for one of my brothers. And so I'll get an email or a phone call for somebody that's literally on the other side of the country, right? And that's because to them, the last name was the only thing that mattered. The first names are close enough, and they sent, it's like, being John Smith. Somehow they send all the John Smiths, almost all of them, the right emails, versus John Smith or Joan Smith, right? So my name is Toyin, my brother's name is Tosin, my other brother's name is Toby. I get all of their emails, or their snail mails, or whatever, right? And this happens all the time, because when a human is checking this stuff, they don't, they're like, yeah, they see the last name,
Close
it looks hard enough, close enough, It's all gotta be the same person,
Probably misspelling.
if they spelled it correctly, right?
Just because
But,
you're not George Foreman, George Foreman, George Foreman, or George Foreman.
or Georgina, right? So I think I've beaten the value customer thing dead, right? Do you hate it when you go to a site where you just bought these pair of fancy shoes and they advertise the same pair of fancy shoes you just bought, right? I do not want to go to a site. I want that site to remember, hopefully, that I bought those pair of fancy shoes and not advertise to me shoes of that same kind. I'd rather they advertise to me socks or fancy string or anything else than that same shoe, right? Because it shows me that they're not tracking or they track all kinds of crap about us. You're telling me they can't figure out that I just bought that shoe, right? The more money you make with your site, the more you can spend on these kind of customization, and in the industry we call it personalization options. There are 300 companies out there that do this stuff. You don't need to pay attention to most of it. I don't care what anybody says. These are all diminishing returns, right? If you follow the Pareto principle, the first 80% of what you do is what's gonna make most of the difference, right? If you're trying to go for every little additional slice, it's gonna cost more and more and more money. So when in doubt, make sure you have at least your email working properly. And when your user signs in, it says, hi Steve, or hi Toyin, or hi whatever, right? That's it. If you can clear those two hurdles, that is what most people are looking for. That will change 5 years from now, 10 years from now, but for now, that is still a reasonable hurdle. And so any of the standard e-com systems that you're using will support that level of personalization. Does that all make sense? Okay. So I'm saying this in case you're not using WooCommerce, Shopify, or BigCommerce, you're using something like Yahoo Shops or something. You might need to double check that that stuff works. Yep.
So a type of personalization I haven't heard you mention yet
Mm-hmm.
is a year from now getting an email or something going, those sneakers have probably had some use. Are you ready for for a new pair?
Yes, you can do that, but that costs money,
Okay.
right? The easier so that is something you can do, and that is something you should do, but from a ROI standpoint, it's probably not worth it in the near term. The thing that is worth it, if you want to do something like on a clock like that, is birthdays or birth months, right? I signed up to Nintendo to be able to do parental something or other for my daughter's Nintendo Switch. The first of the month, September 1st, I got 3 emails from Nintendo telling me, hey, we're happy it's your birthday. You can buy this thing for a discount because it's your birthday. September 1, and I thought, okay, well, that's Nintendo. And then 8 other companies, like, they don't even care that what day is my birthday anymore. They're just like, here's a coupon at the beginning of the month. You have 30 days, go spend it, right? So that's actually a very powerful tool, because there's some people, I'm mostly, unless it was like Best Buy or Home Depot, I'm pretty much immune to that kind of behavior, right? But some people are not, and they feel special when it's their birthday or their, I have friends, especially women, that do like a birth week, and so they have stuff every day, and it's like, I've gone to mimosas 3 days in a row for somebody's birthday, and I'm not even sure what the actual birthday is, right? I just know it's somewhere in this week. So some people like feeling special like that, and if you give them coupons and discounts and that kind of thing, or recognition of any kind during that time frame, people appreciate that. Another one that's also easy to do is an anniversary. This is the anniversary of the date you signed up to be a customer. This is an anniversary of the first time you bought a thing from us, right? Those are also good. Those are easy to get pieces of data, and those are easy items to generate emails based on. Does that all make sense? Now, things like products you bought,
Might have expired.
warranties, those things, those are good things to work on, but those require active, like either development or data work. And these other things don't require pretty much any work at all, so it's easy to do. Okay. All right, let's talk about being proactive. So use yourself as your model customer, right? Well, maybe, you know, if you're selling, I don't know, World War II soldier hats, maybe you're not your model customer. But the stuff that you expect your e-com store to do is what your customers are probably going to expect your e-com store to do. We've all been coddled or primed, if you will, by Amazon, right? And so I expect there to be a return policy somewhere. I expect to be able to figure out half the stuff I want to be able to do. I don't want to wait and do a live chat or a phone call or an email or blah, blah, blah. Even though all of those things are relatively fast, right? I want to be able to search for the thing I'm looking for, or click on frequently asked questions or knowledge base, et cetera, and get the info myself. Does this thing come in blue? I want to be able to figure that out. What is your return policy? I want to be able to figure that out. Can I open the case and still return it or not, right? How, you know, I don't know, can I use it once and then send it back, right? Those kind of questions are good questions for your customers that your customers are going to want to know. You don't want yourself or whoever your customer support person is answering those same questions over and over and over. Now, if you have 100 customers hitting your site, 40 to 50 of them will check out your frequently asked questions. They will check out your knowledge base. So you've just cut your stream of support questions in half, right? So when people ask questions, I don't care what it is, if it's a store, if it's a class, they're always the top 100 frequently asked questions, right? Does it come in blue? Is every industry I've ever worked, there's always somebody that asks specifically, does it come in blue, right? Even if it's like DeWalt power tools, which only come in yellow and black, right? Somebody's always gonna ask, does it come in specifically blue, right? If it's a high enough number, you could put it in your frequently asked questions, right? The goal is to put enough stuff in your frequently asked questions that they don't come to you for that specific question. When they come to you for a question that requires human interaction, it should be a higher value question, something that requires somebody to think and not just regurgitate information. So a good tier 1 is frequently asked questions. Good tier 2 is a knowledge base. If it requires any kind of configuration, any kind of forethought, planning, and it's more than a sentence or two in answering, or maybe 3 sentences or something, then maybe that's where a knowledge base makes more sense. Knowledge bases are great if you have complicated product, or if you have complicated scenarios like you're doing stuff multi-state, well not multi-state, multi-country, if you're doing stuff with fancy software, if you have to assemble furniture, right? Here's how to assemble, you know, obviously you ship them the product, it has the IKEA-like pictures or whatever. Now I come back to the website, what does this thing do? That's a frequently asked question. What are the steps for assembling the blah 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 desk, right? The something, I'll make up some consonants like I'm IKEA. How do I put this thing together? That is not a frequently asked question, but that is something that makes sense as a knowledge-based question. Does that make sense? Yes, sir.
But 2 months ago, you did a presentation on memberships, forums and such, and you talked a bit about knowledge bases then.
Yep.
Can you recommend one? I do a product that's more like a lifestyle, so a lot more
Question.
friendly.
Right. So, let's see. Actually, I think there's just like WP knowledge base. There are 3 or 4 of them that are pretty decent. If you look for, it's a company called Heroic Themes, I think, which has a is a premium knowledge-based software that's pretty good. But there are 2 or 3 free knowledge-based systems that are decent. They don't look as nice, but they're decent. If you want something that looks nice, the Heroic Themes one, I think it's probably the one to go with. Okay. It doesn't have to be pretty, but it does have to have the info. right? So if you have, you don't want to have a knowledge base with 20 questions. You want to wait till you have 50, 100 questions, and then it's worth putting all that stuff together. If you're less than that, then keep them all in frequently asked questions. But you can have a frequently asked question and a knowledge base. Again, the idea for frequently asked questions are for short answers, knowledge base are for longer answers. If you have a lot of frequently asked questions, 200, 1,000, whatever it is, then put everything in the knowledge base. Okay? Again, if I order something from Amazon, what does Amazon do? It sends me a, hey, this thing just sold. Thank you for buying our product. A day or two later, this thing just shipped out. Here's the tracking number. 3 days later, your product just arrived. Another 3 days later, can you give us a review on this product? A week later, why haven't you given us a review on this product? Right? Those are the kind of things that you want to be able to do as a store owner, right? Again, WooCommerce, Shopify, BigCommerce already do this stuff where if you're making a purchase, they will send an immediate message out to your customer. One of the things that a lot of these systems don't do unless you configure it is the tracking number. So if you ship something out, you'll get a tracking number from UPS or Post Office or FedEx. Make sure you're putting that stuff back into that order so your customer can get that second email with a tracking number, because that is the number one question people ask after they've bought a product. When is it getting here? What is the tracking number? That is a series of questions you can get rid of. Now, if you have the budget or the payment system you're using, you can actually automate that process so that when the thing gets shipped out, it automatically sends it back to Woo or sends it back to Shopify or BigCommerce, and it will automatically do that process for you. But if you don't have the budget or the time to configure it, it's always good you can start off manually. If you're selling 5 products, 10 products, 50 products, you don't need that. If you're selling 500 products, then you should probably be thinking about it, okay? But what you want to do is give people feedback as quickly and as often as possible, right? So places like if you work for a bank or an insurance company, when you change your password, they send you an email, your password has just been changed. Your icon has just been changed. Your secondary email has, right? All these things you might not have to do for e-commerce specifically, but these are things that people are expecting notifications from. And sometimes people, if they don't get those things, then they think, well, maybe my sale didn't go through, maybe I need to buy again, right? And so these are things you want to be careful about, because of course, if they bought the same thing twice, now they're mad at you that you double billed them, even though they are the one that went in and filled it out twice. Does that make sense? Okay. So, we already talked about package tracking. All right. Meet your customer. I do not mean physically, although that is a good option if you can do it. What I mean is wherever your customer is, there should you also be, right? So if your customer is on Facebook, be on Facebook. If your customer is on Snapchat, be on Snapchat. I'm still not sold on that one, but wherever your customers congregate, you should try and have a presence. Of course, this is easy to say, it's harder to do because it costs money to be able to monitor and maintain all of these places, right? At minimum, you want to have some kind of support email on your website. Tier 2 after that is maybe you have live chat. Tier 3 after that is maybe you have some kind of chat system that talks to a Facebook chat or WhatsApp chat. After that would be Twitter maybe, or let's switch those in Facebook, right? So those are the kind of things to be thinking about when you want to communicate with your customer. So if you have a Facebook account, a YouTube account, a Twitter, a LinkedIn, whatever for your company, expect that some percentage of your customer will try and reach out to you that way, right? There are softwares, if it's frequent enough, you can use softwares that will sort of combine all that inbound traffic into some interface so you can reply to. If it's not that frequent, you can sort of do it piecemeal for now, right? Again, the trade-off is somewhere, in my opinion, around 50. Once you hit 50, then maybe it's for each of these different avenues, it's probably worth starting to systemize it, okay? Yes, go ahead.
You have SMS listed there. What
Yep.
does WooCommerce
WooCommerce does not have something specific for SMS, but there are third-party plugins that will talk with WooCommerce. You drop some JavaScript on your site, and I don't remember any of them off the top of my head. The reason why this is important is because for a lot of sites now, 50% or more of their site visits are on mobile devices, right?
75%?
For you, 75?
Yes,
Okay.
75%.
So if 50% or more are mobile devices, there's no point trying to talk to them on live chat when the window is this big, right? Maybe WhatsApp if you have an icon for it, maybe Facebook chat. But one thing we know every mobile device has is SMS. So you can there are services you drop in and say, hey, you want us to talk to you? We're only gonna talk to you via chat if you approve. So they click something, they put in their phone number, you now get a prompt and allows you to chat with them. There are softwares out there that do this. Twilio has a small software package, but people like Intercom actually is probably a pretty decent one, and they have software that will send messages over SMS and email and I don't know, whatever else. There are, again, there are like 300 companies that do customer interaction, okay? I can put some links on some specifics. I
What
don't.
was the second company you mentioned?
Twilio, Intercom?
Yeah.
All right, so does that make sense?
Yes.
Yep.
What's your thoughts on chatbots?
I don't like.
Mini chat's not your thing, huh?
I'm not a fan of AI in general, and it's not because I love Terminator movies, which I do. I feel like AI is, at least now, is a net plus, but there's a lot of stuff that you miss if you let your software take care of it, okay? So I'm one of those people, again, I'm an ecom person. I never have to, if I did my job right, I never have to think about shipping. I never have to think about customer service. I never have to think about those things. However, thinking about those things makes me better at my job, right? If I sell 50,000 products and we can't ship it out, it doesn't matter how good my ecom site is if we can't move the product, right? If it takes 4 minutes for a customer that's wanting you to ask if it comes in blue, it takes 4 minutes to find the answer to that, we've lost that customer, right? So those are things that are problems I would like to know about. So personally, I prefer having a human or a suite of humans that are asking those questions. Now, my opinion might change in a year or 6 months from now as these softwares get better. And some of them are already decent. There are some systems now, like if you're using, bigger companies like Geico or, I don't know, Adidas or something, they have pretty good chat systems already. You can ask the first tier of questions. Hey, I'm looking for blue shoes. Oh, I found these 17 blue shoes. What are you looking for? And to sort of help you filter down, those work nicely, right? But there's a difference between that kind of thing, which is a fancy search engine, and to pull information you might not have thought of the right words to look for, versus something that actually simulates a human being, right? So a chatbot is decent for your off hours, but when you have on hours, it's better to have on hours as a human, because that also better helps you improve your chatbot, okay? All right, so let's talk about stuff that we know for sure works. Most expensive thing you can do for talking to customer, or for being able to interact with customers, is phone support. A human being can handle one phone call at a time. However, you get all of that person's attention, which is great if you're a pissed off customer, and it's horrible if you're a business, because that means that person is talking to one person at a time, right? So imagine calling your insurance agent, imagine having a 45-minute conversation about whether this thing is blue. You've just blown 44 minutes of that person's time, right, answering that question. So what you want to do is have a set of sort of trade-offs for when you want to use these services. Again, the gold standard is phone support. However, most of us don't have the time or the inclination for phone support. Next best thing is live chat. I personally am not a big fan of live chat because I think I know what I'm doing and I don't want somebody to pop up and bother me while I'm going through my process. However, people respond very well to live chat, and A customer service rep can handle 3 to 5 support requests or conversations on live chat, especially if you're folks that grew up with AOL Instant Messenger, you did that stuff all the time. I'm sure right now in the middle of the day when you're supposed to be working, you're probably floating 3 or 4 conversations on your phone. You can definitely do that on a computer, okay? The lowest tier, of course, that's also the cheapest, is email. You can float hundreds or thousands, whatever it is, of support requests and contact via email, except that is slow, right? The benefit of live chat and the benefit of phone support is it's instant feedback to your customer. And so if you can, swing doing live chat. It is better to have a live chat system that falls back to a frequently asked questions or knowledge base. And so even if you're only available for live chat 1 hour a day, for that 1 hour, you're gonna give better service to your customers. Does that make sense? Okay. And we already talked about SMS. So don't forget about your mobile users. Some people are getting, as you just said, was it 75%?
75% of my customers come from
Mobile?
mobile.
Okay. So some sites are much lower, but almost every site I've seen now is at 50%. So if you're thinking of, again, a live chat system, and you're at 75%, you don't need a live chat system. You need an SMS system, right?
I use it.
If you're 50-50 or lower, you can use something else, right? But the beauty of SMS is it's almost free, right? And you are also sure you have the customer's actual information. So you can reach out and send a message to them. You should not abuse it because people, I mean, I'm sure just like you guys would be pissed off. It's one thing when I get spam email. I'm livid when I get spam texts.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I use it a lot for abandoned carts,
Mm-hmm.
and that's pretty simple. They have to agree to receive those messages in the first place.
What are you using, like Klaviyo or something?
I actually am using SMS Bump,
SMS bump, got it. Okay.
and Klaviyo is my email.
Email, okay. That's for Shopify, right?
Yes.
Okay.
But I can use Klaviyo on WordPress.
Right, but MailChimp used to be Shopify's bow until recently. All right.
What about community forums?
Community forums are not a bad option. Again, community forums make sense when you have a complicated product, and also makes sense when you have a lot of customers, right? Until you have hundreds or thousands of customers, the forum doesn't really make sense because you're not going to have the volume to create a forum. It is better to just have a knowledge base, right? And-
what space?
I'm sorry?
I couldn't hear it from the.
It's better to have a knowledge base.
Oh, okay.
So if every question, as a general rule, every question the customer asks you, you should write down, you write your response and send it to them. Then you take a second look at that question and is there a way you can make it more general? And if you can, you tweak it, rewrite it, whatever, and make it into a knowledge base item, okay? If it's your first 20 questions, your site's just live, make it really simple and make it into frequently asked question, right? The goal here is that when somebody asks a question, your internal support people should be able to search your own knowledge base and copy and paste responses from there, or use their responses as a baseline to follow up on, right? You don't want them to think any more than they have to. So if they're asking standard questions or relatively standard questions, you should be able to pull that information from your knowledge base for several reasons. One, people can't spell nowadays. That's a big one. And people aren't always sure if that thing came in blue, right? So if your knowledge base has that information, have them send that and not wing it, right? Because somebody's gonna be pissed off later where they said, oh, it didn't come in blue, so I bought purple. And then the following week I got an email saying, hey, this thing is on sale in blue. You lied to me, right? So whatever you can do to make life easier for a customer, do. But again, your first line of defense is your customer service team. And for a lot of us, we are our first line of defense, right? So whatever you need to do to make your life easier doing customer service, you should do it. So you don't have to think of you don't have to make up a new sentence or new paragraph each time you're answering somebody. You come up with this is how I answer if this is a returnable item. This is how I answer if it comes in blue. This is how I answer if there are discounts, et cetera, right? And so you do your off-the-cuff response the first time, the second time. After that, you take that and you want to sort of take a second pass at it to really nail down what your response is. And going forward, you use that same nailed down response. All right, so just like the goal for e-com is to make it easy for somebody to buy, the goal for customer service is for somebody to feel they gotten service, right? So obviously make it easy for somebody to buy. That's the number one goal of an e-com site. Number two goal of an e-com site is to make it easy for them to get a response back. So if they're mad about something, refund as much as you can. It's better to lose 5%, 10% on your refunds than to have somebody badmouth you on Yelp or Better Business Bureau, or they buy sucks.com, right? And the biggest thing here is your response time, right? You don't want your customer to throw there's a difference between asking a question here, and if you ask me a question and I respond 3 days later, you don't feel heard, right? That is one of the problems with community forums or emails. If you're available to give immediate feedback, do so. It gives a better sense of care and interest from you to the customer than not, right? For example, I love Google, right? I mostly love Google. I love them less and less the further they are from not being evil. But I use pretty much every Google product except for the ones that listen to me all the time. The problem with Google, until this year, you can't call a human being. You can't email a human being, right? I happen to have a friend that works at Google, so he's my cousin's husband, so I call and email him, right? But I'm not most people, right? So if I want to get satisfaction from Google, what you normally do is you go to their website and you realize there's no phone number. And you realize there's no help at something at Google or whatever. Then you go to the contact us form, you put in your information, you wait 3 days, they send you an email telling you they don't support phone service. You respond to the 1 or 2 options they give you, and you go through a decision tree. Sorry, it's listening to me right now. Shut up, Google. You go through a phone tree. So actually, this is a great example. So this is what is this? This is a Moto phone. Okay, 2 phones ago, I had a Nexus 6 phone. Cost me $600, right? And I bought it because it was brand new, shiny, had all the whistles and the bells. And I had it for about 6 months, stopped working. I bought it straight from Google, which meant there's no return policy on the website, which meant there's no phone number to call, there's no help at Google Store or whatever. I had to put in the contact thing on the main Google site, not the Google Store, right? It took me 2 days to get a response. Again, phone not working for those 2 days. And then they tell me, we will send you a package, you can put the phone in, ship it out, and when we fix it, we'll ship it back. What's the time estimate? A month. A month, right? Now, you can hate Verizon as much as you want. You can walk into a Verizon store today, you might have to sit there for 3 hours, but you're gonna get satisfaction today, right? So I had to go back to Google, because I'm all in on Google. I'm like, I want a new phone today, ship it to me so I get it tomorrow, and then I'll send you my other phone, right? So of course I got the new phone. By the time they sent me my old phone, I was already in love with my new phone, right? And I, sold it. But that is a Google problem. Google has no interest in actual human beings, right? They're starting to change that this year. But again, if you want like actual support, you want a human being, even if they're in India or whatever, Google is not the company for you, okay? Again, response time. The reason why live chat and phone is very good is somebody knows that you're listening to them because you just responded to them. Is that a question or no? Okay. So I said something earlier about meeting your customers. Wherever they have questions, you should try and talk to them. But you can also be proactive in talking to them. Even if you only have 10 customers, especially if you only have 10 customers, reach out to your customers. Hey, thank you for buying from us. You bought something from us 3 months ago, 2 months ago. This should not be an automated email. This should be a written by hand email. We're hoping to serve you better. We're hoping you'll be a future customer. What is it that you like that you like? What is it you didn't like? What do you wish we did? Those kind of questions. You don't want to ask a direct, how can we make more money from you question. But that is really what you're asking, right? It's always better to ask an open-ended question because you don't know what you don't know, right? For example, how many of you as kids ever did, do you like me, yes or no, right? And you get the no. Well, maybe you should have put a maybe, right? Or maybe you should have put further notes, right? I would like you if you didn't smell like old shoes, right? And you could have solved that problem, but instead you get a no, right? And so when you're asking questions of your customers, what you want to do is not paint them into a corner. Let them say whatever they feel like saying. You're gonna, hopefully, you will learn something you didn't know to think of, right? One of the places I worked, we had, a dress company. And so we said, we have $200 dresses, we have $2,000 dresses, we have everything in between. And if you are a model or fashion person, we have $20,000 dresses, right? Not my thing, but people love $20,000 dresses. So we thought, hey, we'll do a giveaway for a $200 dress. Nobody was interested. Even though, based on the odds, like 1 in 20 people would have won, right? Because we had a budget of like 20 grand, and we'll say, okay, we'll give away 100, $200 dresses. Nobody cared. And then we said, what would you prefer to have happen? And people preferred to get the $2,000 dresses, right? Because they knew they couldn't fit in the $20,000 dresses. So they would prefer to get the $2,000 dresses. So we said, all right, we're gonna change this and we'll make we're only gonna sell have three dresses. There's a $2,000 dress straight up. There's a $2,000 dress with corsage, blah, 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 blah. Sorry, these are prom dresses. And then there's a $2,000 dress with corsage, blah, 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 blah. And you get to meet the dress designer, right? All of a sudden, we went from negative interest to tons and tons of interest. This is not stuff, I'm not the right guy to come up with this scheme, right? But I was in charge of this. This is not something I ever would have thought of because I would have been a straight numbers person. Odds of winning are 1 in 20. I don't like to gamble, that's good, right? But we were smart enough to ask people what they wanted and they told us. And we got more people sign up for that chance to win the $2,000 dress than we had customers at that time, right? We were able to bump our year's revenue by almost 50%. Normally it's about 20%, 20 to 25%. But after all these people now put in, the sweepstakes, they went back and checked out our site. They still mostly bought $200 dresses, right? But just a lot more people bought those $200 dresses because they have that dream, however fleetingly, that they were gonna get a $2,000 dress. Does that make sense? So, I have spent a lot of time in the fashion industry, beauty ecom. I'm very confident and comfortable in my lack of knowledge in that industry, right? If, again, only places I can claim any kind of expertise is if it's Home Depot or Best Buy. Outside of those two, I know nothing. And so I have no problem asking my customers, what is it that you want? Even if you know your customers, right? Even if you're 100% sure you know exactly what your customers want, verify it, okay? I worked on a site about knitting. I'm not the world's best knitter, but my mom did her, minimum work to make sure I could make myself a hat and a scarf, right? So I know the basics of knitting. I know what the words are that you're supposed to use. And I figured I can handle this stuff. Turns out, I don't know all the new words. I knew the words from if you were a middle-aged woman in Nigeria in the 1980s. So the stuff that I'm putting for search engine results don't come back as anything because, what we say in America is different from what you say in a Commonwealth country, right? This is stuff I wouldn't know until I asked my customers, and they told me what the correct words were. Actually, they used words I didn't know what it meant, and I had to go look it up. And that's when I figured out that I was using the wrong words. Okay? So again, always go and ask your customers. Don't ask them for yes, no's. Make them tell you whatever they want to tell you. All right, if somebody's mad at you, oh yes, go ahead.
I have a quick question, kind of going back to reaching to your customers.
Sure.
Do you think there's a difference in saying thank you for buying from us versus thank you for buying from me?
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
You want to always go with us. And here's why. You could be hit by a bus tomorrow, today, right? People want to feel you're gonna be around. And it's not just for e-com stores, it's for anything, right? If I'm running, if I'm doing consulting for somebody, I don't say, hi, this is Toy & Co. It is Toy & Co, right? Because that gives them a little buffer against in case I get hit by a bus, in case my mind is blown by my $2,000 dress I get as a gift and I decide to skip out on town, right? You always want it to be an us. It doesn't have to be a big us. Again, this can be the royal we. Now, when you're emailing them, you can say, hi, I am so-and-so as a rep from the company, but the company is still an us, right? Let me give you an example. Way back 6-7 years ago, the company I used to work for, our customer support, there were three women that did the customer support. But we didn't want to have to, but we were using one email and they were all sort of splitting who was on the email at one time. And so they all picked the same name. And so all emails from this name, because there was no person in the company that existed with that name, if you got an email from that, that means that's from the customer support team. Here's the problem. People would have a great conversation with this person via email, and they had a wow experience, which is one of the things the founder wanted. A month later, this lady would show up at the store and want to talk to the person she talked to on the phone. Or she sends a thank you card. And you don't understand how rare it is in customer service that somebody comes back well after the fact and sends you a thank you card for having customer service so good, I decided to do a second round on my own to thank you, right? So these are important. Like this person comes back and says, I really appreciated blah, blah, blah that you did for me. Thank you, Skylar. There's not actually a Skylar, right? So who does it go to, right? Who comes down to talk to them when we only had one store, right? And so we had to come up with a process. And so again, those three women, they either alternated or they looked up that customer really quickly and came down to talk to them, or we just said Skylar's not available. Most of the time that's what we did. Leave the card, they'll call you back. So whoever it was that matched with that customer could then follow up with them on the phone and thank them. But there are two things that are crazy there. One, people had really good support experiences, and two, they had good enough support experiences they wanted to meet the person, right, that they talked to. Now this is a great problem to have, but that goes south when they realize Skylar's not a person, it's a network of people, right? And so how do you handle that? You want to seem, as much as possible, you want to be genuine, you want to be authentic. It is better to seem authentic than to actually be authentic, okay? Don't say, hey, we need you guys to buy this month because we need $600 to keep the doors open, right? So the idea is to make them think of you as a person inside an organization or an organization that cares. You don't want them to, by cares, I don't mean like, I care about your dog. I mean, you're not a miscellaneous number to us, right? And that is one of the hardest things to keep as a company gets larger and larger, right? So, you know, the same company I'm talking about, our e-com site went up 10x in 2 years, right? The technology of that was hard. How do you handle the 10x in 2 years? The customer service for that was ridiculous. Because to keep people feeling like they mattered, you had to spend a lot more time. Because now there could be 30 customer service people that are talking to them. Now there are dudes on the team, definitely not Skylers, right? How do you feel that work? Yes, sir?
So is this where something like cause-based marketing, Patagonia comes to mind? That, you know, in the authentic, where it's not necessarily personnel, but that you care for something that your customers also care for.
Right, so it is one way of sporting, and in whatever our gen is now, is it Z, Y, millennials, then whatever it is, younger people, everybody under 40, 35, whatever, don't want to just buy product X. If I'm looking between two products and they're more or less equal, the product that aspires higher is more likely to get my money, right? Tom's shoes, I have lots of problems with them as somebody that grew up in a third world country, but Tom's shoes aspires high. You buy a shoe, we give a shoe. Warby Parker, you buy some glasses, we give some glasses, right? I'm waiting for Microsoft or Dell. You buy a Dell, they give a Dell, or whatever, right? There are companies where you buy soda and they give free water, or maybe not free water, but at least water cleansing systems, right? You don't necessarily want to do something, if you're going to do that kind of thing, try and do it on brand. If you can't do it on brand, make it about cancer. I hate to sound super cynical, but cancer works because everybody, unfortunately, knows somebody that's had cancer, right? If I'm selling beard oil, I'm not doing breast cancer. I'm doing testicular cancer, face cancer. I don't know what there's face cancer, tongue cancer, right?
Skin cancer.
Skin cancer, thank you. If I'm doing exercise equipment, maybe I do leukemia or something a little more esoteric, right? But, you know, if you want to stand out, you want something that matches your product or something that matches your personal story, right? So hopefully you've never had this kind of tragedy, but somebody close to you died of something. You have family members that are vets, you know, there are all kinds of, you know, you can always just chip into like the Wounded Warrior Project or something, right? Or Happy Joe or whatever. It doesn't have to be a ton of money. The point is that you care more than competitor X who cares not at all, right? Of course, you have to come up with processes so you're not just like siphoning the money or something. But the goal is that when all else is even, if you're willing to part with 5% of your profits, that 5% shows that you care about something that makes you more attractive to a customer. Okay. Did that answer your question? Okay. We already talked about celebrating birthdays, birth months, and the like. These are all good touch points to talk to your customer, right? You are not a mind reader. You don't know what they want. You think you know what they want, right? But as with any good relationship, it's all about communication. That's what my girlfriend tells me. So that's the same thing you're supposed to do with your customers. The more you talk to them, and more importantly, the more they talk to you, the better idea you have for your customers. In the marketing industry, we have a term called personas. And a persona, so I might sell phone cases, right? So the question is, who buys this kind of phone case? It could be an average Joe like me, right? I buy a certain kind of phone case. But what if I was a construction boss and I need to buy it for everybody on my site so they don't crack their phones? Maybe that's a slightly different pitch that I'm making than to an individual person, right? So if I'm in construction, maybe I want it to be bright yellow or something, or orange. And maybe I want it even more rugged. And the things I care about is not stuff for one team, it's how do you charge the battery for 50 devices? How do you make it drop resistant for 2 floors? I'm just making up stuff, right? So it might not be worth for me as an individual to buy a $50 case that's drop resistant for 2 floors, but if I'm in construction, it might be, right? So most of the time you're selling $10, $15 cases, but it might make sense for that $50 case if you're targeting the right customer. And you don't know if you're targeting the right customer until you ask them what their industry is, ask them what their interest is in phone cases, right? All right, so a couple more things. Yes, sir.
I have to leave in a few seconds.
Mhm.
One of the things I struggle with is how to segment my audience as early as possible when they arrive at the site,
Mhm.
and to get some of this type of segmentation data.
Right.
Is there a simple plugin that you can do, or is it just like,
No, just ask them.
yeah, okay, I'm not that technically savvy.
Send an email. Send a link to what's the site? What's the chimp? Not chimp. SurveyMonkey. Thank you.
Yeah.
Send the SurveyMonkey 3-question email. Email that goes to 3 questions. Okay. What you want to be able to figure out is one of the ways you can segment is how much are they spending at a time. If everybody's spending the same amount, then that's not very useful. Another thing is, are they buying?
So, excuse me, you
Yeah,
could,
go ahead.
so if somebody comes to your website, they're anonymous to you yet, you know, I'm not getting a cookie on their
Mhm.
site, or I have to figure that out. But I can send a MailChimp survey to them, or just to pop up that.
No, you
allows
send it
advice
to
them.
the people that are visiting your site that you don't know. You assume that they're similar to people that have already visited your site. So you're modeling any new anonymous people on your known people,
Yeah,
right? So you ask your known people, what is it you care about? What kind of thing are you looking to buy, right? And based on that, you come up with those personas. And so if you use an example I was just talking about with phone cases, you might design your site for the regular user that has one phone with a $20 case, $15 case. But maybe you make one section or one pane of your carousel or whatever to highlight that $50 item,
Yeah.
right? Specifically for construction. And maybe that's the way you segment your homepage, right?
yeah.
Another way to segment your homepage is you don't have them hit your homepage. When somebody comes to your site, if it's not the first time they've already done some identification of themselves, you say in the future, click this link and it'll take you to the construction super site or something, right? And so they are already self-selecting where they go. But otherwise, what you're gonna be doing is just like a news site, you're going to touch on your greatest hits. Maybe based on population, based on volume, $15 cases. Then, rose gold cases, I don't know. Then bright orange, bright red cases for 3 times as much. And based on that, you can track, at that point, you can then figure out where people are going and figure out if you need to adjust it. Does that make
Thank
sense?
you very much.
No problem. All right, so you want to plan for 5 times whatever your volume is. So when we do Black Friday, Cyber Monday prep, which is now, it's a nice racket when you can get it. A company says, hey, we sold this much money or this much product so far this year. And for some people, the week of Black Friday, Cyber Monday is going to be 25, sometimes 50% of their business, right? Most people understand that number, they don't understand the volume. So if you have done 300 returns all year long, based on that math, if it's 25% of your business, it means that week you're gonna have to do 75 returns, right? People don't think about that math when it comes to scale, right? If you have boxed 300 things all year long, and that week you're boxing 75 things, whatever it is, right? So, as a general rule, the math on your site should not change significantly between a regular time of the year and Black Friday, Cyber Monday. And so what we do when we prep them is we say, what does the math show us your volume should be? And we double and triple those numbers in case you get lucky, right? And so if we double and triple those numbers, you have 300 returns all year long, and we now say, well, if you think 25% of your business is going to be in this time, that means 75 returns. If we double or triple that, if we double it, that means you're going to be doing 100 returns, 150 returns in that time frame. Can you handle 150 returns in 7 days? What took you 8 months, 9 months to do, right? Answer is generally no, right? So if the answer is no, what are the trade-offs? What are you willing to live with or live without to be able to get those returns out of the door, right? If you did the 300 returns, but it came to 20,000 sales for the year up till that point, for those 9, 10 months up to then, are you telling me that means that you're going to move 50,000 items in 7 days? Can you do that, right? What do you need to do to be able to handle those 50,000 items in 7 days? And is it going to be 7 days? Is it going to be 2 weeks? Do you need to add more people, right? Do you need to compromise on boxing? So instead of having 8 different size boxes you can put everything in, maybe that's the time you get, have one box that fits 80% of the stuff. And you've seen this before when you order from Amazon. You get a box this big,
For an item this
and it
big.
holds this,
Yeah.
right? The reason they do that is not because Amazon is stupid, it's because Amazon's in a hurry, and everybody gets one box. It's only if your thing is huge that they'll go spend the time to do something else. The mental work for a human to sort between which box you're going to put something in is 45 seconds, a minute, 15 seconds, whatever it is that you've just wasted. It's better to just know, I have just one box to pick. The other benefit of having just one box to pick is you can pre-work. I know I have just one box. We pre-tape the boxes. We set them all up as this giant stack of boxes, so you're not opening them up, taping them, blah, 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 blah. You're making it much more of a assembly line, right?
It's like a pizza place.
Exactly. So you want to, especially when you're talking about high traffic, you want to reduce the thought that any individual person has to do. The way you handle that is you pre-think or you post-think. So you pre-think, you stage as much as you can, and you push all the stuff that you can after the sale, after the traffic. So if you're going to be sending emails about, did you like our blah, 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 after you send them the product, maybe you wait 3 or 4 days before you start that process again, okay? But those are the kind of things you want to be thinking about, especially at this time of the year for next month. If you're doing a new site, or you're still a relatively new site, you're not really going to have to worry about this kind of thing, but these are the kind of things to be keeping in mind for your busy time of the year. It might not be Black Friday, Cyber Monday, it might be Super Bowl, it might be Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, 4th of July, Cinco de Mayo. Whatever your product is, there's going to be some time that is busy for you. And so your target is to think of not just what you do for from a day-to-day basis, but when that thing gets nuts, plan for the nuttiness. Does that make sense? All right, the last thing I'm going to talk about is use software. You can get away for a long time just doing it by hand. Problem with doing it by hand eventually is people will make mistakes because humans are humans. So wherever you can replace having to think of each of the separate steps, getting your text right, validating, coupons, printing out shipping labels, all these things, wherever you can remove a human from that process, even if it's a 10-second task with a human, wherever you can remove a human from that process, over time do so, right? There's a concept in computer science called speed up, which is, you find the place with the greatest impact to your time. Something takes 30 minutes to do. Let's say baking a cake. Baking a cake takes 45 minutes, 30 minutes to cook, 15 minutes to prep, right? I can do all kinds of things on the prep. Even if I cut it down to 2 minutes, it's still gonna be 30 minutes to bake, right? So if somebody came to me today and says, I can cut your baking time in half, or I can cut your prep time in half, obviously it's worth spending the money to cut the baking time in half, right? So when you're thinking of steps in your e-com process, somebody orders from you, you put the thing in a box, you ship it out, you send them a bunch of emails. Each of those steps requires some human intervention or some software intervention. So think of the stuff that takes the most time. As a general rule, it's the step where you put it in the box and send it out. Or when you get it back in the box when they don't like the thing, right? Those are the two places that absolutely require human intervention. So those are the places to work on first, and then you work on anywhere else that you can save time. So it might be you generate coupons for people's birthdays. Instead of giving everybody a custom coupon, you have one coupon for September, right? Instead of doing a fancy thing on your site for a survey, use SurveyMonkey, right? You can offload or work to systems that do that stuff automatically. You don't need something that's 100% beautiful and 100% customized to your website. You can do something, most people are using applications of SurveyMonkey, like SurveyMonkey. So if you're using that, or that's what you've seen other people use the same thing. You don't have to be fancy. Again, if you're authentic or seem authentic, people are going to be willing to live with maybe not the absolute best version of that software. Okay? And I think that's it. That is it. All right. Anybody have questions?
I have something to add.
Yes, ma'am.
SurveyMonkey's great when you send it to them.
Yep.
If you think your Facebook page is gonna get you the interaction that you want on a survey, probably won't.
So people, that's a good point. I don't remember what we call it. I'm just gonna call it the laws of the internet, okay? Laws of the internet says this, and it's a little worse now, but I'm gonna use data from about 4 or 5 years ago. If I put out a post and I write something, I spent 4 days writing some thoughtful, elegant software commentary on software or politics or whatever, right? 1,000 people are gonna click the link. 900 people maybe might read the article, right? Out of the 900 people that read the article, 90 of them will click like, and 9 of them will put a response on the article. One of them is going to somehow end up with Nazis, or Trump, or aliens or something that pisses everybody else off. That is the law of the internet, okay? The Trump part is new, but the Nazis and aliens has been there for decades, all right? But that is what happens for any set of data that is exposed to regular humans on the internet,
They're
right?
random, regular humans.
They're not random. They're, if these people had to say that to you in your face, they would not do it, right? It's because it's the internet. So when you are running a site, there are a couple of key things, if there anything else you're gonna remember from this today. 1, people do not read. 2, people have an idea of what the site is going to do, whether or not you tell them what the site is going to do. Okay? You are going to argue with them in the future where they say, I thought it came in blue. And you're like, no, this thing does not come in blue. What you have to do is defend for when you have that argument and say, look, we wrote one of the 10 edicts never comes in blue. Or on that product page does not come in blue, right? When you're having that argument with that customer, if you're having an argument with that customer, even though you know they never read, you need to have done your due diligence from when that argument comes, all right? And 3, don't take it personally. It's the internet. They're idiots. We're all idiots on the internet, right? And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. So if you look at the comments on the Meetup, you will see that I gave you the live link for the Toyin's talk tonight, so you can play it again if you want to think about it. I also gave you the link to the WooCommerce Slack community, so you can join that WooCommerce Slack community, so you can, if you can post questions, like I did this with my WooCommerce site, it did that, anybody have any suggestions? And there's usually developers there who will say, hey, I understand what you did, if you do, take that plugin out, put this plugin in, it should fix it. So it gives you some between Meetup help to have, at least, WooCommerce developers there reading the Slack as part of the community. And then I gave you another link to some very helpful documentation in the Woo site. So that way you have some support. Now, we will not, this is our last meeting for the year. We are not going to be meeting Thanksgiving week because as store owners, you should all be getting ready for your Cyber Monday, come on. So we're not gonna mess around with the meeting.
I will be getting ready if you're not.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, he goes, not even his daughter sees of that week. So most of us are gonna be very busy, either keeping our clients online or you're gonna be running your own sites. We'll be moving to start our meetings up again in January, and so just watch for the meetup. And if you have questions, post them up in the Slack, and there's a way to get you guys help. So thank you very much. Oh, yes, Brian?
I don't know if you talked about this before I got here. If there are ideas or questions, things you'd be interested in us talking about next year, please also post that. Because right now I'm short on ideas for next year.
How to train your slave labor, your kids, your stuff.
Incentives.
Is that it?
Yes, you gotta get the right incentives.
Baseball bat.
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
It's all sugar. It's all
cash
sugar.
flow. Or a movie that she really wants to see that Twain is very iffy about, when he's talking to her. He's gonna let her have it, but she's gonna work for it. He's worked it out.
Yeah.
He's worked it out. Well, thank you very much for all coming, and we appreciate those of you who come, through. And please, if you have ideas, please get them to me. You can get them to me on the Austin Wordpress Meetup or the Meetup, and we're happy to, we're here to help you. So happy to do a class that you specifically asked for. So thanks a lot for showing up.
And thank you all for organizing this and presenting.
This is the sticker I promised.
So you guys are driving.
You left your job and now you're trying to figure out.
Let me know when you're ready. I'm gonna feel like I'm going for about 2 hours.
Well, I was trying to back.
I'm actually
Was it like a commodity, like,
I will send you. And I'll tell you what it's like. Yeah. And I'll tell you exactly what to get. I will save you.
I will make it. I feel like a lot of people are under these
Probably kind of WordPress. Because it's like that, are y'all trying to get my discount?